Daniel awoke to darkness, his body aching from the crash. The cockpit of his fighter had been reduced to twisted metal, and his head throbbed with a dull, persistent pain. The air was heavy and unfamiliar, filled with a sharp, metallic tang that burned his lungs. When his vision cleared, he saw them. Towering figures with jagged armor that gleamed like obsidian. Their eyes glowed faintly, an eerie yellow light that pierced the shadows. The Chrysler. One of them approached, her movements deliberate and calculated. Her crimson skin shimmered under the alien sun filtering through the wreckage. She studied him with an expression that was equal parts curiosity and disdain. "You're alive," she said, her voice a low growl. Daniel tried to speak, but found his throat dry. Not by choice. The warrior, Varisha, turned to her comrades. "Take him. The council will decide his fate." Daniel was thrown into a cell carved from stone, the walls covered in unfamiliar glyphs that glowed faintly in the dark. His wrists were bound by a strange energy field that pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. Varisha stood guard outside his cell, her spear resting against the wall. She didn't speak to him at first, her gaze fixed on the horizon beyond the cell's singular window. But Daniel, ever the optimist, broke the silence. "So, what happens now?" She glanced at him briefly. "You wait." "For what?" "For judgment. Or execution." He smirked, despite himself. "Friendly place you've got here." Varisha's eyes narrowed. "You joke, but my people have lost much to yours. Don't expect sympathy." Daniel's smile faded. "And you think I'm the one responsible for that? I'm just a pilot. I didn't start this war. Yet you fight it." Her words cut deeper than he expected. Days passed, and Daniel remained her prisoner. Varisha brought him food and water, but spoke little. When she did, it was usually to correct his assumptions about her people or to warn him against attempting escape. But Daniel was persistent. He asked questions about her culture, her family, the war. At first, she ignored him, but eventually, her defenses began to crack. "My family," she began one night, her voice hesitant. "They were in the city of Kithira when your kind bombed it. My mate and my children. All gone." Daniel's heart sank. I'm sorry." She turned on him, her expression fierce. "Your apology means nothing, human. What would you know of loss?" "I know enough," he said quietly. "I lost my brother in this war. My parents, too. Not to your people, but to the decisions of my own leaders." Her eyes searched his, and for the first time, she saw something other than an enemy. The fragile understanding between them was shattered when an alarm blared through the Chrysler stronghold. Varisha left abruptly, locking his cell behind her. Through the window, Daniel saw smoke rising from the horizon. When she returned hours later, her face was grim. "There's been an attack," she said, pacing the room. "Your people?" "No. Rebels. Chrysler who believe the council has failed us. They seek to overthrow our leaders, even if it means destroying everything." "And you're caught in the middle," Daniel said, his mind working quickly. "Let me help." She laughed bitterly. "Why would I trust you?" "Because I'm not your enemy," he said, standing as close to the energy field as he dared. "And if we don't work together, these rebels might kill us both." The stronghold was no longer safe. The rebels had infiltrated deeper than Varisha anticipated, and she knew she couldn't keep Daniel there without risking his death and her own failure. Against her better judgment, she deactivated the energy field and handed him a weapon. "Try anything, and I'll kill you myself," she warned. "Understood," Daniel said, his grip on the alien weapon unsteady. They moved through the crumbling stronghold, navigating collapsing corridors and evading rebel patrols. Along the way, Daniel's sharp instincts saved them more than once, and Varisha began to see him as more than just a burden. By the time they reached the outskirts, their uneasy alliance had solidified into something closer to mutual respect. The wilderness of Chrysler's homeworld was a stark, unforgiving place. Towering spires of jagged rock jutted into a blood-red sky, and strange creatures stalked the shadows. Daniel and Varisha set up a makeshift camp in a secluded ravine. As they rested, she began to teach him the basics of surviving in her world. How to track prey, avoid predators, and navigate by the shifting constellations. In return, Daniel shared stories of Earth, painting a picture of its oceans, forests, and cities. She listened intently, her animosity toward humanity softening with each passing day. "Your world sounds beautiful," she admitted one night. "It is," Daniel said, "and so is yours, in its own way." Their journey took them to a hidden rebel outpost, where Varisha overheard a chilling plan. The rebels intended to activate a long-forgotten weapon buried beneath the planet's surface, a weapon capable of wiping out entire species. "They'll destroy us all," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "Then we have to stop them," Daniel said. Varisha hesitated. "It won't be easy. The weapon is heavily guarded, and we're only two." "Two is enough," he said, his confidence infectious. The assault on the rebel base was chaotic and brutal. Varisha's combat skills and Daniel's ingenuity proved a potent combination. Together, they disabled the weapon systems, narrowly escaping before the rebels could react. In the aftermath, as they stood amidst the wreckage, Varisha turned to Daniel. "You could have escaped," she said. "You could have used this as a chance to leave." He smiled faintly. "I told you, I'm not your enemy." With the rebel threat neutralized, Varisha and Daniel faced a choice: return to the Chrysler Council and risk imprisonment, or venture into the unknown together. Varisha looked out at the horizon, her heart heavy with uncertainty. "What happens now?" Daniel stepped beside her. "We find a way forward. Together." As the alien sun set, casting the landscape in shades of gold and crimson, their journey was far from over. But for the first time, they faced it not as enemies, but as allies, and perhaps something more. The wilderness stretched endlessly before them, a vast, untamed expanse of jagged cliffs, dense forests, and rivers that shimmered with alien bioluminescence under the crimson sun. Varisha and Daniel trekked side by side, their uneasy partnership evolving into something more cohesive. Yet doubts lingered in Varisha's mind. She had spent years hating humans, and her people's propaganda still haunted her. Could she truly trust this man? And what would happen if their paths diverged? Daniel, too, struggled with uncertainty. Though he had grown to respect Varisha, he couldn't forget the lives lost on both sides of the conflict. Every quiet moment between them was heavy with unspoken fears. "Varisha," Daniel said one night as they camped near a river whose waters glowed faintly with an inner light. "What do you think will happen if we try to return to your council?" She stared into the flickering fire. "They won't trust you. They might not even trust me. But if we don't go back, we'll be fugitives forever." "Then why risk it?" "Because someone has to," she said firmly. "Someone has to show them there's another way." As they ventured closer to Chrysler civilization, they stumbled upon an abandoned village. The ruins were eerily silent, their jagged architecture crumbling under years of neglect. "This place," Varisha murmured, her voice filled with sorrow. "What happened here?" Daniel asked. "The village was caught in the crossfire during the early days of the war," she explained, running her hand along a charred wall. "My people fled, but many didn't survive. It's one of the reasons I fought so fiercely." Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry, Varisha. Truly." She looked at him, her expression softening. Perhaps it's time to stop fighting." Their journey took a perilous turn when a Chrysler patrol discovered them at the edge of a canyon. Recognizing Varisha as a former soldier, the patrol's leader, Captain Draken, demanded an explanation. "You dare bring a human into our territory?" Draken growled, his spear crackling with energy. "He's not our enemy," Varisha said firmly. "He helped stop the rebels. Without him, they would have destroyed us all." Draken sneered. "Do you expect the council to believe such nonsense? The rebels may be a threat, but humans are worse." Before Varisha could respond, Daniel stepped forward. "If you don't believe her, take me to the council yourself. Let them decide my fate." Draken's eyes narrowed. "Very well, but don't expect mercy." The Chrysler Council chamber was a towering structure of obsidian and crystal, its walls glowing faintly with ancient energy. Daniel stood before the assembled counselors, his posture tense but defiant. Varisha stood beside him, her expression unreadable. The counselors questioned them relentlessly, their voices sharp and skeptical. "This human was captured as an enemy," one counselor said. "Why should we believe he's anything more?" Varisha stepped forward. "Because he saved our world. The rebels would have unleashed devastation beyond imagining if not for him. He's not the enemy you think he is." The council fell silent, their expressions contemplative. Finally, the head counselor spoke. "We will deliberate. Until then, the human remains under guard." As Daniel awaited the council's decision, he found himself isolated in a guarded chamber. Varisha visited him when she could, bringing food and updates. One evening, another visitor arrived, a young Kreiser named Kirill, a member of the council's advisory circle. "You're the human pilot," Kirill said, his tone more curious than accusatory. "That's me," Daniel replied warily. "I've read the reports about what you did. It's unconventional." Kirill hesitated. "But perhaps necessary. My people are stubborn, slow to trust. If you truly wish for peace, you must show them something undeniable." "And how do I do that?" "Survive," Kirill said simply. "When the council tests you, and they will, survive." The council's decision came swiftly. Daniel would undergo the Virith, an ancient trial designed to test an outsider's worthiness. The trial was grueling, involving physical challenges, intellectual puzzles, and encounters with Kreiser's deadliest predators. Varisha was forbidden from assisting him, but she watched from the sidelines, her heart pounding with every obstacle he faced. Daniel's determination and resourcefulness carried him through the trial. He outmaneuvered predators, deciphered ancient glyphs, and even showed compassion by sparing a wounded creature when he could have killed it. When the trial ended, the council was forced to acknowledge his resilience and his humanity. After days of deliberation, the council granted Daniel limited asylum. He was allowed to remain in Kreiser territory under Varisha's supervision, but their trust was tentative at best. Varisha and Daniel set out to prove that peace was possible, visiting villages and speaking with leaders on both sides of the conflict. Slowly, they began to gather support from those who had grown weary of war. But not everyone welcomed their message. Whispers of dissent grew louder, and shadowy figures followed their every move. Their journey eventually brought them face to face with the true mastermind behind the rebellion, a Kreiser warlord named Zyril. Ruthless and cunning, Zyril sought to exploit the chaos for his own gain, rallying disillusioned soldiers to his cause. "You speak of peace," Zyril sneered when they confronted him. "But peace is a lie. Strength is the only language the galaxy understands." Varisha's voice was steady. "Strength doesn't come from destruction. It comes from unity." Zyril laughed. "And you think this human can bring unity? He's a symbol of everything we've lost." Daniel stepped forward. "I'm not your enemy. And if you think I am, then maybe you've already lost more than you realize." Zyril's forces attacked during the night, their assault relentless and devastating. Varisha and Daniel fought side by side, rallying their allies to defend the progress they had made. In the heat of battle, Varisha faced Zyril in a brutal duel. Their weapons clashed, sparks flying as she matched his ferocity with her skill. Meanwhile, Daniel coordinated the defense, using his knowledge of strategy to outmaneuver the rebels. The battle ended in a hard-won victory, but at great cost. Zyril escaped, vowing revenge, and many lives were lost. In the aftermath, Varisha and Daniel stood together, their bond stronger than ever. The council, moved by their actions, pledged to pursue peace talks with humanity. But the threat of Zyril loomed, and they knew their work was far from over. "What happens now?" Varisha asked as they gazed at the rising sun. "We keep going," Daniel said, his voice filled with quiet determination. And so, with hope in their hearts and danger on the horizon, they set out into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Though the council's pledge to pursue peace was a milestone, the scars of war ran deep. Among the villages and settlements Varisha and Daniel visited, they encountered resistance, not from rebels, but from ordinary Kreiser and humans who had lost everything to the conflict. A Kreiser elder in one village sneered at their presence. "You think peace is as simple as words? My family is gone, my home is rubble, and your kind still holds the weapons that did this." Daniel looked at the elder, his voice steady. I can't undo what's been done. But if we don't try to change, then those losses will mean nothing. The elder was silent for a long moment, then turned away. You're not wrong, human. But words alone won't save us. Zyril wasted no time in rebuilding his forces. Rumors reached Varisha and Daniel of stolen Chrysler ships and alliances forged in the shadows. Worse, whispers suggested that Zyril had begun working with disillusioned human mercenaries, soldiers of fortune who saw profit in prolonging the conflict. One day, as they met with a human representative in a neutral zone, the meeting was interrupted by an attack. Drones armed with plasma weaponry descended on the site, killing indiscriminately. Varisha and Daniel barely escaped, but many of their allies were not so lucky. This was Zyril's doing, Varisha said, her hands clenched in anger. He's trying to scare us into submission, or bait us into a fight, Daniel countered. He thrives on chaos. Determined to confront Zyril before his plans could escalate, Varisha and Daniel set out to track him down. Their search led them to the Borderlands, a lawless region of the Chrysler world where smugglers and mercenaries operated with impunity. They disguised themselves, blending into the crowd at a bustling black market hub. Varisha's crimson skin and imposing stature made her presence known, but it was Daniel's quick thinking that got them close to their target. At a dingy cantina, they overheard a conversation between two mercenaries. Zyril was gathering forces at an abandoned military outpost in the Ashen Canyons. This is it, Varisha said, her voice low but resolute. We take the fight to him. The journey to the Ashen Canyons was treacherous. The terrain was a jagged wasteland, with razor-sharp rock formations and unpredictable storms. As they navigated the hostile environment, Varisha and Daniel shared quiet moments of reflection. Why do you keep fighting? She asked him one night as they camped beneath a cliff. For the same reason you do, he said. Because if we don't, who will? She studied him for a moment, then nodded. You're a strange man, Daniel, but you're a good one. When they reached the outpost, it was heavily fortified. Zyril had amassed an army of rebels and mercenaries, their combined forces a daunting sight. We can't take them head-on, Daniel said. We need to sow chaos, make them fight each other. Varisha nodded. I'll take the rebels. You handle the mercenaries. Meet me at the command center. The plan relied on precision and deception. Varisha infiltrated the rebel ranks, spreading rumors of betrayal within their leadership. Meanwhile, Daniel sabotaged the mercenaries' equipment, turning their greed and paranoia against them. As chaos erupted in the outpost, Varisha and Daniel fought their way to Zyril's command center. The final confrontation was brutal. Zyril, towering and relentless, wielded his dual plasma blades with terrifying skill. Varisha met him head-on, their weapons clashing in a flurry of sparks and energy. Meanwhile, Daniel worked to disable Zyril's control systems, which were linked to a massive warship overhead. If Zyril activated the ship's weapons, it would annihilate the region. You can't stop me, Varisha, Zyril snarled as their blades locked. You've already lost. No, she said, her voice steady. We've just begun. With a final surge of strength, she disarmed him, her blade poised at his throat. End it, Zyril spat. You know you want to. Varisha hesitated, the weight of her choices pressing down on her. But before she could act, Daniel's voice echoed over the comms. Varisha, we've got a problem. The warship's power core is overloading. If we don't shut it down, it's going to take out half the planet. As Zyril laughed at the looming destruction, Varisha and Daniel made a fateful decision. Leaving Zyril unconscious, they raced to the warship's core. The ship's interior was a labyrinth of failing systems and rising heat. The power core glowed ominously, its energy surging out of control. There's no time to shut it down remotely, Daniel said. I'll do it manually. No, Varisha said firmly. We do this together. With seconds to spare, they managed to stabilize the core, but at great cost. The warship collapsed around them, and they barely escaped as the vessel exploded in the sky. Zyril was captured by the Chrysler Council, his forces scattered. The warlord's defeat sent a powerful message to both humans and Chrysler. Peace was possible, but it required vigilance and sacrifice. Varisha and Daniel, hailed as heroes, used their newfound influence to continue building bridges between their people. But as they stood together on the balcony of the rebuilt council chamber, gazing at the distant stars, they knew their work was far from over. "What comes next?" Daniel asked. Varisha smiled faintly. "The galaxy is vast, and its challenges endless. But whatever comes, we face it together." Months after Zyral's defeat, the Kreiser Council convened an unprecedented summit with human leaders. Representatives from both sides gathered in the Great Crystal Hall, a sprawling structure that symbolized the resilience of the Kreiser people. Varisha and Daniel stood together as observers, their roles as mediators now recognized by both factions. Though tensions ran high, their efforts bore fruit as the two sides agreed to a tentative armistice. "This is just the beginning," Varisha said as they left the hall, her voice tinged with cautious optimism. Daniel nodded. "A fragile peace, but peace nonetheless." Despite the summit's success, shadowy forces continued to lurk in the galaxy's corners. Reports of rogue factions, disgruntled humans and Kreiser unwilling to embrace peace, spread like wildfire. Varisha and Daniel took it upon themselves to address these threats, traveling to remote colonies and war-torn regions to mediate disputes. Their journey was fraught with danger, but it also strengthened their bond. One day, as they stood overlooking the ruins of a rebel stronghold they had disarmed, Daniel spoke quietly. "Do you think we're making a difference?" Varisha looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I think we're giving people hope, and sometimes that's enough." Their most challenging mission came when a splinter faction of Zyral's rebels threatened to reignite the war by stealing an ancient Kreiser artifact capable of unleashing catastrophic energy. In a desperate bid to stop them, Varisha and Daniel led a daring assault on the faction's base. The battle was fierce, and though they succeeded in retrieving the artifact, the cost was devastating. Daniel was mortally wounded during the mission, his injuries too severe for even Kreiser medicine to heal. As he lay in Varisha's arms, the light fading from his eyes, he spoke his final words. "You've got to keep going, Varisha. Don't let them forget what we've built, what we've fought for." Her voice broke as she replied, "I won't. I promise." In the years that followed, Varisha continued their mission. Her name became a symbol of unity, her story shared across both human and Kreiser territories. Though the pain of losing Daniel never left her, it fueled her determination to honor his memory. One day, as she stood aboard a Kreiser starship overlooking a newly established human Kreiser colony, a young envoy approached her. "Ambassador Varisha," the envoy said, "we've received word that the rebel factions have finally disbanded. The peace is holding." Varisha nodded, her heart heavy but hopeful. "Then we've done what we set out to do." As the ship prepared to depart, Varisha gazed out at the stars, a bittersweet smile on her face. The galaxy was vast, filled with unknown challenges and opportunities. And though she now faced it alone, she carried with her the memory of the man who had taught her the true meaning of courage and connection. The path ahead was uncertain, but she embraced it with unwavering resolve.